All right, I am here with Rocky Votolato. Rocky, thank you so much for being a musician's musician.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it is such an honor. And we are going to be talking about a really incredible band called Jawbreaker, who, and if I'm being honest, I didn't have a lot of knowledge about Jawbreaker before this. I knew that all of my favorite musicians loved Jawbreaker, but I didn't get why until you picked it. And then I did some digging and I was like, it makes so much sense. But before we get into that, I did want to just kind of touch on what's new with you. You have a new band, you have a new album coming out, you have a bunch of singles that are out now. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and this is part of why, I picked Jawbreaker, because it's like,
yes.
It's more like back to the roots of what inspired me to start playing music, and that's, and this band, the new band Suzzallo that I'm doing is, it's kind of a return to form, in a way, back to the kind of art that I was making when I was younger. And, I just, I've been doing, most people know me for the solo thing, right? It's like, I see, is that Television of Saints back there?
It is indeed, yes. Yep, I got it.
Nice. So that's kind of how most people connected to and relate to my music, is this softer, very singer-songwriter focused. I saw you had a conversation with Damon Gerardo, which was awesome.
Yeah.
He's an old friend of mine, and I come much more from that world of with the solo project. And so I toured with Damien back in the day, so I went through a personal tragedy, and that really reshaped my life. And everything changed. And so that's kind of how this new project was born, with Suzzallo.
Yeah, for sure. And you were kind of, there's a few things I want to touch on there, but, talking about how it's kind of like a return to form. And it does feel like, for those who don't know, you were in a band called Waxwing for a long time. Yep. Yeah. And, it harkens back a little bit to that, but it feels very different. Like, it feels like if you had that, but all of like the songwriting knowledge that you had gained over the years and then applied it back to it. So there's like that, I don't know how to really describe it. It almost is like a Smashing Pumpkins-y kind of thing, more than it is like a,
and
it rules.
It's very early 90s energy. Like there's this huge part of me that, I went through this tragedy experience, and I just wanted to go back to this place I was at when I felt, I love that music. It just kind of like reconnected me to what I love most about this particular style of music that was happening in the early mid 90s all the way through like, mid 2000s. And, and that's kind of, but I love that you noticed that too. I feel like Sue-Zuh-Low is very different from Wax, and it is because of this other, all the experiences I've had since then, and applying that experience to the songwriting process and to, just shaping all that and what I wanted to create with the songs.
Yeah, definitely. And, I also know that you did have a personal tragedy, and this album has such a level of catharsis to it too. When there's a couple of songs in where like the chorus hits and like you as the listener just feel like you are screaming about it. You know, like it's just like, you just feel it so deeply, and it's such a beautiful record. And I'm just really,
thanks for saying that, Nick. I appreciate it, man. And the fact that you said the word catharsis, I feel like that is totally what Suzzallo is about, and this, it's a lot of, it's processing grief, and it's kind of, but it's about, really, for me, it's about letting people know at this point that if you've been through this some kind of extreme tragedy or grief in your life or loss, that art can help, and it's always been a kind of a therapy for me. I wasn't as conscious of it when I was younger with all the Rocky solo stuff and everything. But
Sure.
I think that's what was going on. You know, I was trying to,
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out life and myself through art and music. And, but through this process, it was much more immediate and much more kind of like, it was all about survival. You know, I needed it more than I've ever needed to make art and music. And I just, you know, I poured everything I had into this project and this record. And, and so for me, it was incredibly cathartic and necessary. And, you know, and so that's kind of when I've been having interviews with people, I've just been wanting to share that, just that like if someone's going through this, that having an art practice or, you know, whatever it is, doesn't have to be music, but you know, if you're painting or sculpting or whatever you're doing, it's like, it can really help. And it's just a way to express, you know, because when I was just dealing with so much pain and you have to get it out somehow.
Yeah, you do.
Know? And I feel like music is such a beautiful container, you know, for that stuff. And it really helped me to be able to kind of keep going, moving forward in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, from my personal experience, I also experienced a huge loss in my life. And it was the same thing. Like I didn't really know how else to express this grief and like these incredibly heavy feelings without making music about it and making art about it. Cause it's like, I mean, like, you know, I don't know you in a super personal level, but it's like how people like us process this stuff.
Absolutely.
Whether it's subconscious or conscious in that specific case where it's like, you know, I don't know what else to do with this except write about it.
Right. Yeah. And in this case, you know, I mean, because my wife and I, we lost our child,
right.
You know, and so Keenan was non-binary trans. And so they were 22 and, you know, and so it happened very suddenly with a car accident, you know, and so this was in 2021.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it was so life altering. Like the word that came to mind most for me was shattering, you know, it was shattered, you know, that's how I felt like, and I felt like it shattered my identity, you know, it was like everything that I related to, I no longer related to or felt that it meant anything to me, especially acoustic guitar and like softer music and all the kind of stuff that I did. Couldn't listen to it. Still have a hard time listening to it, to be honest.
Yeah.
It makes me angry. I don't know. I had this deep anger, you know, at just the injustice of this thing that happened. And I just felt like, you know, I couldn't make any sense of my reality, but I had definitely a primal rage, you know, it was very, you know, I think shattering. That's just that's how I felt. Yeah. And so, luckily, when I found it, brought me back to this music, you know, that we're going to talk about today, and that was so helpful. You know, I wanted to hear At the Drive-In. I wanted to hear like, you know, Inside Out. I want to hear Zach De La Rocha scream. Like that is what I felt like. You know, that Cedric was screaming. Like that's what I felt like, and I needed something that I could actually relate to. I feel like it got rid of all the bullshit. There was like a no bullshit filter, you know, that was like, you know, I'm grateful for that, you know, but it did totally change me as an artist, like to the core, you know, and I feel like it reconnected me with this vision and dream I've always had that was, you know, the beginnings of which were expressed through Waxwing, you know, when I made those records, but now it's more honed and refined into what I really want to do. Yes. And I couldn't be happier with the Suzzallo record. I love it so much. I'm excited to share it.
It's so good. And it comes out in May, right?
Yeah. It comes out May 2nd.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, for anybody who's listening, please like put that on your radar. Cause it's a tremendous album.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's such an achievement. So, but yeah, on that note, just speaking of, you know, music that you were kind of more familiar with from like, you know, that older style of music, I suppose that you used to play or something like that. Sure. Jawbreaker. So like, I usually like to start these conversations by saying, do you remember the first time that you heard Jawbreaker?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do, actually.
Okay.
The first time I heard Jawbreaker was live at their show. So I was at the show. It was at the old Firehouse in Redmond. It's like this legendary all ages venue here in Seattle, or just outside of Seattle, in a suburb called Redmond. And, so I went there a lot. You know, I was probably, I don't know, 16, 17.
Okay.
Yeah, I was probably 17 years old. Mm-hmm. They played this all ages venue a few times, and they kind of came through. And I guess this would have been 94. So I guess we can check what year that 24-Hour Revenge Therapy came out, because that's the tour that they were on.
That was 94.
Was it 94? Okay,
that
good.
Was 94.
Yeah, see, good memory.
Yep.
So that, and I didn't know the band. You know, I just went to the show because I was going to so many shows. It was that period of my life where I was going to see everything I could. Going to tons of shows around town, and the old Firehouse was also like a teen center, and I actually even worked there as like a teen counselor.
Oh,
you know,
cool.
and I would run sound for the band sometimes, but I just remember looking up at the stage and seeing Blake like jumping around and screaming, and I was like, what is this? I've never seen anything like it. Like, it was just like really high energy, just amazing, punk rock from the Bay Area.
Yeah, for sure. And like that album too, like seeing him on that tour is gotta be something really special, because like of their albums, I know that Dear You is like kind of like the one that everybody
that's the one most people pick as a favorite, right?
Right. Which it wasn't at the time it was released, but like as I was kind of, diving back into Jawbreaker's discography to kind of learn a little bit more on my end, that was the album that stuck out to me. It felt so fresh and new, and unlike a lot, like so similar to so many things I had heard before, but so unlike anything I've ever heard before.
Right. I feel like his perspective and how he shapes songs, especially with the lyrics, is kind of their main like superpower. You know, it's like he just, it's like this narrative. You know, like each song. And I mean, for me, I feel like I have a different perspective about Jawbreaker because it was really close. You know, like I saw them live probably, I don't know, at least 10 times.
Oh, wow.
So I saw the band a lot, like every time they came to Seattle, and I would travel like to Olympia or, just if they were in the Northwest, I was trying to go see them, because I was a fan from back in the day. And I remember, back to that first show, I remember seeing them there and it being such an impactful show on me as this young, person, and very formative. And I was like, I always cite that show as one of the times I remember saying to myself, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do with my life.
Yeah, definitely.
And it was so inspiring. Yeah, it was really, really cool. And so I love that band, and I like there's this grittiness about it. It's like, it's very authentic. And I think that's why musicians are very drawn to Jawbreaker, especially because it's back to the no bullshit filter. It's like you can tell this band's authentic about what they're singing, and there's real pain and there's real catharsis there. Back to what we were talking about with Suzzallo. It's like, for me, that's kind of where it started.
Yeah, definitely. And you can really tell, there's so much with their lyrics, like you were saying, it is really their superpower. Like, there is a lot of like catharsis and a lot of huge feelings there, but there's also like a lot of comedy and like lightheartedness and like self-awareness and self-deprecation and
really clever lines.
Very clever.
And it's like, oh, I see what you're doing.
yeah, absolutely. I think that was something that because I'm a little younger, but there's a lot of people who were from the generation kind of before me who have talked up Jawbreaker to be like this kind of a monolith, like, you like Green Day? Well, you should be listening to Jawbreaker.
Yeah, I like Green Day, of course. I mean, I like Green Day. I just saw him on this last tour.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, me and John Goodmanson went and saw him. We got hooked up with some tickets and just went and saw him. It was a great show and great band. Those guys are so talented. Right. They're so good at it. But it was never, for me, it was never as close to my heart as Jawbreaker. Jawbreaker was just more, it's like this very gritty, very real, just super, I don't know. It's just like, it takes you to a different place, Yeah.
And you were kind of saying there's like no bullshit, but like, it really is. Like, there's not like anything too showy about it or anything like that. Right. Like, it's just strictly good writing.
Yeah. It's a little darker. It's a little bit off the worn path, and I think artistically they took more chances, and it's definitely not, it's not really pop music as much as it is kind of pop punk,
right?
But it's not, it's really unique and special, and I'd say pretty original.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. There was like I was watching this kind of short documentary about them, and I guess like the major labels, when they signed to One for Dear You, they were pitching them to everybody as like the good in between Nirvana and Green Day. And so
interesting
listening to them with that in mind, especially 24-Hour Revenge Therapy, because that has Albini's sound.
It totally does. I think I kind of agree with this. There's so much between those two bands.
It makes a lot of sense. And when people were like kind of saying that, it built them up, kind of like I was saying before, to be this thing that was like untouchable.
Right.
And so like, those albums kind of tanked for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then just all of a sudden they skyrocketed. And it's such like a crazy thing.
Cult following for them.
Massive cult following for them.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned Nirvana too, because like I saw Jawbreaker play a show shortly after Kurt passed. And I remember this was like, it was such an emotional moment, like, because Blake was friends with Kurt and they had toured with Nirvana, just not long before Kurt died. Mm-hmm. And he gave this beautiful eulogy to Kurt on stage and dedicated Bivouac to him, which is the last song from that album.
Yeah, from Bivouac.
Yeah, from Bivouac. Mm-hmm. And it was just this like, oh man, it was such an intense moment. And like, it's just burned in my memory. I'll never forget that because it was just so impactful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so beautiful. In that documentary that I was kind of telling you about, there's a story about them, getting asked to play with Nirvana, which was like pretty controversial at the time.
Right. At the time.
And they pull up to this, huge venue, and Nirvana has 10 tour buses, and they pull up in their rickety little van and, they play the show. And then as they're coming off, they see that Kurt was sitting side stage, and, they're like, oh my God, he was like, he could be on his own bus watching a movie or something. He watched us. Like, that's crazy.
Right. He was a fan.
Yeah. And then he like tugged on their shirt and he was like, hey, are you going to play Bivouac on this tour? Like,
oh, no way.
Really? So stoked. Yeah. He was like such a huge fan. And he was like, hey,
oh, wow.
Are you going to like, and so like from that moment, they were like, okay, yeah, Nirvana's cool. Like, they can hang.
That's so cool. Maybe that must be why. I mean, he ended up dedicating that song in particular.
Yeah.
If Kurt had told him that was one of his favorites. That's so cool. I love that was all connected.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And the fact that he did that is so cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it was super intense. But I was just happy to be there. I was grateful that I got to see that band so much. And it really did, that was a really formative time for me as an artist. And it had a huge impact on me and kind of shaped the way I thought about songwriting. Lyrics were always super important to me. I wanted to be honest. I think that's a big thing about Jawbreakers. It's just very honest music. It's kind of, it's raw. It's not hiding what's really going on, and it's a little bit dark. It's but it's just great storytelling and great songwriting. And I love his voice, and I love I love Adam's drumming, but I think the guitar sounds too are. Blake is a master with his. I think last time I saw him play, it was with the Forgetters, actually, his project after Jawbreaker. Before they got back together.
Right.
And, but as soon as I went and saw him, I was like, oh, there it is. There's that guitar sound again. On stage, it's so amazing. It's better live than it is on any of the records, I think. So,
for 24-hour Revenge Therapy, I think one of the things that people really praised it for was just that's as close as we've gotten to their live sound.
Yeah. It's
and,
interesting.
That energy.
It's so weird too, because I was talking to Goodmanson about Albini and just his approach and the huge difference between 24-hour and then Dear You. It's this is a very, very different production style, you know?
For sure.
And a lot of people who I've played 24-hour for, they're like, that sounds terrible. Because it's it's very raw. It's super punk rock. And that was Albini's thing, right? He just threw up an SM57 and that's it. He just wanted to kind of capture the band without any compression and without making taking an effort to make it sound good, which part of me, I'm with that, but then, and I think that 24 Hours sounds incredible. I did a little bit of a dive this week too, after I knew we were going to talk. So I went and listened to the records again, and it was such an interesting experience because I was like, I don't know why, but I think 24 Hours sounds the best,
There's something about it.
Technically speaking, it sounds the worst.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of, it's not hi-fi,
No, very much not.
But the emotion in it and the way it captures the songs, and it's just very real. And I like the sound of Dear You. At the time, I know that was a huge controversy. When that record came out, it was people are like, what happened to Jawbreaker? And some people totally hated it. You were in one of two camps. You either totally loved it and you were super stoked, or you absolutely hated it and you turned on the band. That's kind of what they went through when that record came out. And
very much so.
It was brutal to watch. I mean, at the time, I was much more a fan of 24 Hour, and I didn't really love Dear You, although I love the songwriting. I thought, and I thought this now, even when I listened to it a few days ago, I was like, it's just great songwriting. I mean,
it is.
Most of the songs are really, really good. I'd say, not all the songs are my favorite on that record, but I love every song on 24 Hour and all the other albums, know?
Yeah, for sure.
I still think it's a solid album, right? I mean, it's amazing. It
is. It's incredible.
They got so much shit, and they really shouldn't have.
No, there was no reason for it. It was just purely oh, you guys are sellouts, and
Right, that was a thing then.
Which is so silly. Especially now that I don't think that, I don't think the music industry, as what it is now, is capable of having a sellout thing.
No, the whole thing is so sold out that it's
right. Yeah, that's it, right? You have to sell out in order to sell any records and make a living in the slightest. So
right. This was a mindset from the 90s and that time of punk rock integrity.
Yes. Yeah.
I think I saw something of Henry Rollins talking about it the other day too, where he was talking about Green Day and all the shit they got even for signing a major label deal, and that whole Gilman scene, but it was kind of a thing in the world I grew up in too, of are you going to go major label and sell out and not be punk or whatever, so that was part of the story of Jawbreaker, sadly, but it bums me out. It hurts me to think that Blake and those guys had to go through that, because just being an artist and being a musician, I I know what they were experiencing, and I just wish that they wouldn't have had to go through that, and that they felt more freedom to make more music.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the important thing with that record and why so many people came back around to it is that even with Dear You, they didn't really make any artistic compromises. It's just It's just a Jawbreaker record that sounds good. You know,
totally. It's just hi-fi.
Yeah, that's it. And so like, you know, they didn't change who they were, the music they wrote or anything like that. No. It just got recorded a little better than the one before it. So like,
totally. And there's so many cool outtakes from it too. Like if you listen to like etc., that has a lot of some of my very favorite Jawbreaker songs were B-sides. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting which ones they decide to choose to put on that album, because I think some of the B-sides they recorded from that time, to me, I liked more than some of the songs that ended up on the record.
Sure, yeah.
But I mean, yeah, they just had so many good songs, and that song "Kiss the Bottle" is probably, you know, in my top 5 favorite Jawbreaker songs.
Oh yeah,
and that's just a B-side that was. Can't remember how it was originally released, maybe on a 7-inch, but I know it came back out, and most people heard it through etc., which was that like, you know, B-sides compilation.
Yeah.
But I love all the songs on that too. I just feel like
it's so good.
There's so much good stuff that they did, and I feel like even though they had a big run, and I still feel like they're unsung because, you know, they didn't really hit the big time.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, they strike me as like a and the band I'm about to compare to does get plenty of flowers, but you know, like they're like a more punk rock or like East Bay punk rock version of like the Replacements or something to me.
Yeah, totally.
Where they have like that kind of sound, like a later version of the Replacements or something, but like, you know, very short-lived. Pretty drastic change in the sounds, like through their discography, and then just kind of like, you know, left for time to kind of make the history that they ended up being, you know. So like with Jawbreaker, you know, they went from Dear You and everybody, like that record kind of tanking, to people loving it again. And you know, I feel like the Replacements had not the same kind of, you know, backlash or something like that, but there was like a resurgence years later of people being like, oh, that band had it, like they had something there. And like now,
once all the drama of that situation and this like sort of small-minded thinking that was going on around, like, well, did you sell out, or you know, you do a major label, your record sounds good, how could you? It's like, but then they even wrote a song about it called Friendly Fire that's on etc., which I love that song. So it's, you know, I think the line is like, my back is warm from your friendly fire. I know you're trying, but could you please aim it higher? It's just like, because the people around them are, you know, just not supporting them in what they're doing. And but I just think it's nice to see that fall away. And then now, I mean, when they came back and they did Riot Fest, I don't know what year that was, but maybe like 2017 or 2018.
Yeah, I think it was 2017.
Was it? Okay, yeah. And it just was a huge resurgence, and people love them again, you know, and I'm just happy they're playing, man. I've seen them a few times since they've been back. And I'm just really, I think like a lot of fans, I'm just hopeful that they'll make another record, you know, because I feel like all this controversy around it probably made them, you know, back to what we were saying earlier in our conversation about writing and like catharsis and being able to have a creative practice just because it's a beautiful thing as a human, you know. I hope that for Blake and for those guys, that they can get to a place where they feel comfortable to just make art. And back to what you said about it being a monolith, and like, I'm sure that pressure is there, and that's part of what's keeping them from, you know, it's a lot to live up to.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And, you know, it's kind of interesting that you said, like, I hope they make a new record, because I feel like they would be kind of at this point, like back to those kind of expectations that they had of like, you know, if Jawbreaker puts out a new record, it better be really good, you know,
right.
and it would kind of be this untouchable thing that they probably wouldn't be able to really do no matter how good it is.
You're right. And that's kind of what I think is going on in their minds and probably stopping them from making it. But I hate that because
I know
as an artist, I just wish it wasn't that way. You know, I wish that we could see what's really going on, which is a human being trying to express something. And it's kind of, no matter what they do, I'm probably going to support it and love it, even if it's not as cool as those, you know, early records. I just think I would love to see them have the freedom to be able to do it. Cause I think we're all being robbed of that next record.
Yeah,
you know?
we are.
I want to hear, or just make one bad one and get it out of the way, and then make the next one that's going to be really good as 24 hour, you know?
Yeah.
But for me, it's more like I'm thinking of them as humans who just, I wish they could continue to make art and express, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, like, I feel like there's been, like, as a younger, you know, music listener, at least, I would always kind of be like, I liked this one album and all of these new albums from this artist, like, just don't stack up to it. But like, as I've gotten older, I've been looking more forward to like the newer releases from these artists that I love so much, because like I enjoy now watching an artist grow as opposed to liking them like kind of be stunted and doing the same thing that they were doing before.
Right.
And like, it just like, I wonder where Jawbreaker has progressed in all this time since Dear You, you know, since
totally.
What, 97.
Yeah, I would love to hear what kind of songs. I mean, you can kind of see it in what happened with Just Brazil, and
that's what I was going to ask. Did you ever get into them?
And then it went to The Forgetters, which was also awesome. I mean, I think Blake would make a great Jawbreaker record. That's just what I think. You know, I think he would, because he's a great songwriter, and you know, and those. And Adam's a great drummer, and you know, and they're just a great band together. The three of them, it's like
they're a tremendous band together.
Yeah. Chris's bass tones and like the way he approaches and thinks about bass. And did you see the documentary ever? The one I think it's called Don't Break Down or something.
I didn't watch that one.
It's super good.
I watched a tremendous amount of clips from it, but I didn't watch the whole thing. That was all I could really find in a pinch, but it was really interesting.
It's super cool. You get a window into their whole world, you know, and all the challenges they had back when they were trying to make this all happen. I think one thing that I like from doing a bit of research on them that I thought was kind of amusing was how many times they broke up. Yeah.
They broke up. Yeah. They broke up like every tour.
Totally.
They break up like mid-tour, and then they did a tour where they're going to have their friends sing for the tour, and then they did one show with that guy and kicked him off.
Is that right? Oh my gosh.
It was when Blake found like the polyp on his vocal cords
when they were in Europe.
Yeah. So like, you know, went to a doctor or whatever before they went to Europe, and they were like, yeah, you're not gonna be able to sing.
Oh wow.
So it's like, okay, well, we'll get our friend to sing. And he was like, maybe they're like tour manager or something like that. And they did one show, and they were like, Blake's just going to sing. It's fine. Like, we'll just do it.
Yeah, it didn't work.
No. And so they went to Europe, and he did like a show, and they did like 4 songs, and he was like spitting out blood.
Oh yeah. I remember reading all about that. And and then that's what I don't remember if it's the third, it's Outpatient. I think it's the third song on, or maybe the 4th song on 24 Hour.
Yep.
And it's kind of about that experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's just wild that like, you know, he had to get that surgery. He got that taken out, and then his voice was different. Like it was a noticeable change between the two, or the first 2 records and the last 2 records.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I was always, I don't know, it definitely, it was very interesting to me, like that whole experience and what he went through. I feel like it did kind of have an impact on me and shape me as a singer, because I was always, when I was younger, I was trying to scream, you know, and I was screaming a lot, and I wanted it to be distorted, but I would have trouble with my voice on occasion, you know, from the screaming and stuff. And then I feel like the way the way it changed after that experience and that surgery, I thought it sounded even better personally to me.
Yeah.
I love, especially the recording. I think the recording he did first, right after that surgery and everything, was on that song "Kiss the Bottle." Which,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's you can hear it. I mean, his voice is like so distorted and just kind of sounds very destroyed, you know?
Yeah.
in this really satisfying, super cool way.
Yeah, definitely.
But I don't know. I mean, I sort of, I feel like I shaped some of what I was doing around that, like searching for a scream and a distortion sound. But then I later realized that I didn't need to do that. It was unhealthy, you know, for me, because everybody's body's different and your anatomy's different. Like the way your voice relates to screaming and how all of it. So if you're, as a singer, now that I've had more knowledge around how it works, it's like, if you're trying to force yourself to sing like someone else to make your sound like them, you can really hurt your voice because it's not meant to do that, you know? And I think for him, he was probably, because I know they were super into GBH and like British punk bands, and like he was making these really tense, distorted sounds that were awesome, but they're like super dangerous, you know?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, I remember, because like I had been familiar enough with Dear You, so I was like, whenever I do a deep dive of an artist, I always start from the very beginning and then like work my way up. And so I was like, well, I got to start with the first Jawbreaker record, and I put it on. I was like, is this the same singer? Like, this is wild.
It sounds so different.
It's so gritty and like, rah, you know. But it's rad. Yeah. It's so rad though. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, it's great.
And it works really well for them. But I wanted to touch on, so like you kind of brought up how you used to like want to like kind of scream a little bit more and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think I remember, and like, please correct me if I'm wrong. I remember you saying in an interview like a long time ago that you had done some voice lessons.
Yes.
Like in between some records. I think it was maybe around Suicide Medicine.
Yeah, I did voice lessons. It was actually later. It was around the time of Television Saints, actually.
Oh, okay. It was.
Because I had gone on tour with Chuck Reagan, and we did like 50 shows in a row, literally without a day off. And that dude screams like crazy.
I was going to say, talk about a gravelly voice.
Yeah. And so, but it was too much for my throat. You know, I kind of hit this point where I had to take a few shows off, you know, and I felt terrible having to cancel. But like after that, I was like, okay, this is my job. You know, I got to get vocal lessons. And so from that point forward, my relationship to singing and the sound of how I sing changed. Yeah. And I feel like it got, for me, much better because I became technically a better singer. And I also knew how to use my voice, you know, in all kinds of ways I couldn't unlock before. Where I just, you know, I gained range, I gained flexibility, like ability to hit certain notes, like all kinds of stuff. And it was with an ease, you know, where I could get more breath, and I knew how to do it a little bit better. But then again, I wasn't really screaming, you know. At that point in my career, I was done with, I wasn't interested in that stuff as much. Had very much moved to a singer-songwriter focus and was making these kind of indie folk quiet records. Yeah. You know,
I mean, you're kind of underselling it a little bit. Cause like you did in like, I mean, the song Montana at the very end of it, like you can really tell like, that's from 2003, you know, so that's from like way before. And then by the time I got these lessons, it was like, well, that was probably like 2012, 2011. Yeah. So it'd almost been like 10 years of you pushing
screaming
like that. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
And I was going to say, like, you know, comparatively, like, you know, not that I think Suicide Medicine might be like one of my favorite records ever made. Like, it's just like such a special record to me and makers. And like, I mean, I really like all your music, but the Suzzallo record, you have that same kind of range and power, but it sounds so much more natural. So like you could still like put some power behind it, but like, you know, it doesn't sound like you're gonna blow your voice out or something.
Yeah, I'm like doing it in a way where it's not going to hurt me as much. You know, maybe like I'm in new territory now. Because I actually, you know, I've been talking to some of my friends who do more screaming and stuff, and I had a long conversation with Johnny Whitney from Blood Brothers.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because they just did that reunion. You know, we went to a Sunny Day show together actually, and we were there like with a bunch of friends and family, and we reconnected at the show and started talking about it. And this was just before they went on tour, and he had been getting some vocal lessons to be able to get ready for that. Yeah, you know, because he screams like really intensely.
No, those Blood Brothers records are nuts with they're really intense. I love them, but
I love them too. And he was really good at, like, for the tour. I guess it worked really well for him because I kept in touch with him about it, and it worked out really well. Like so if you even if you're really pushing your voice, you know, to its absolute limits, I feel like if you kind of know what you're doing a little bit more, you can do it in a way where you can get away with it, you know. Sure. But there's certain kinds of screaming that people do that, like, where it's like false fold screaming, or they call it like a fry scream. It's very much more like metal, or maybe even like new metal. And I just think I don't like it. You know, it's not for me. It's not what I'm doing. I mean, if it's working for people and that's the music that they want to create, awesome. You know, but when I'm screaming, or like the way Blake was screaming, you know, I feel like, or even like Cedric from At the Drive-In, or you know, there's a sound that I'm looking for it's just a real scream. You know, it's not quiet. If you hear this, it's like, oh, maybe you don't want to meet that person in a dark alley. You know, it's like, something is being expressed that's very intense and awesome. And it's like I said with Suzzallo, it was like I even got into doing scream therapy, you know, because the experience was so intense, like nothing formal, but I read about it from actually John Lennon did it. And he did it with, I think he and Harry Nilsson had, you know, developed some techniques around it for themselves that helped them. And in processing my trauma and grief, you know, from losing a child, it was a big part of my recovery, honestly. Like, I was screaming really a lot, you know, like either just like in the car alone or into a pillow, and just as a way to just get that out. So I developed I feel like I unlocked a different gear in my throat, because I wasn't singing, you know, I wasn't worrying about getting hurt or anything. And I did get hurt many times through the process of doing it. Sure. I definitely damaged my voice, you know, but it healed, and it came back, and I learned to more incorporate it in with the songs.
I mean, I also would imagine that, you know, if you're doing scream therapy to process that tremendous grief, you're not really thinking about like, oh, this isn't healthy for my vocal cords. Like, that's probably not the first thing on your mind.
You kind of don't give a shit.
No.
You know,
but that might be kind of the point, actually, you know?
Yeah. For me, it was, it was just all about this catharsis, which, you know, I feel like Suzzallo is an extension of, and very much, you know, that's what this has all been about. You know, and it's so beautiful then to be able to take that and, you know, having made a record now, and I really hope that it can bring that to other people, you know, and bring some comfort in the way that Jawbreaker's records did for me. You know, it's like being able to listen to that catharsis and in the way his voice sounded and the songs he wrote. And I don't know, I think that that's a beautiful thing, you know, in the communities it builds around those pieces of art. It's like, I think it's great. You know, I'm super grateful at this point to even just be able to play music, and, you know, I'm super excited for the new project. I want to continue to make records. You know, we're already.
Please do.
I'm starting to write and working on LP2, and the first one's not out. You know, it's like I feel like it just like put an explosion of creativity there for me. You know, because when you need it to be able to process these things, it's a different kind of experience than if you're like some of my solo albums. You know, the last few or whatever, it was a bit more analytical. You know, you're kind of thinking about, okay, what do I want to do here? You know, and how do I express that? But like. And it's more of a narrative. This is more like a raging rapid or like a flood that's happening, because
it feels like it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, not to say that, you know, your solo records didn't have a lot of feeling behind them, because they're incredibly emotional records. But like this one really does feel like a primal scream, you know, and it in like a musical form, and it's really beautiful.
Thanks,
so
Nick.
the fact that you're doing another one is very exciting.
Yeah, I want to record with John Goodmanson again, hopefully, because I had such a great experience working with him, and just, you know, from a musician perspective, it's like just the amount of experience this guy has and the incredible records that he has made, dude. It was like, I mean, my brother, you know, he made the last two Blood Brothers records,
which are incredible, right?
They sound so good. And he made them at Robert Lang too, which is where we recorded the Sue-Zuh-Low record. And that was a big part of what drew me to wanting to work with him and wanting to go to that studio. I mean, so many great records have been made there. He's made over 50 records there himself, which I think is
that's wild. Yeah, I pulled up his discography just to reference it, because I did know he did Crimes, which as a record I adore as well. But yeah, he worked with Death Cab. He did a couple songs on Transatlanticism. He did Harvey Danger, which is rad. Not a Surf. He did Lucky, which I think is one of the best.
Not a Surf stuff that he recorded sounds so good.
Oh my God, it's incredible. Yeah. So I mean, like, it's wild. I mean, he even did Wu-Tang. So like
that's kind of he's got a good crazy history, you know, just so many great bands. Blonde Redhead's another one.
Sure,
he helped. He recorded those Unwound records that I love too.
Okay.
And he's just a local legend. But I feel like we worked together, and of course I was in a pretty vulnerable space making this particular record, and he held that space for me in such a great way, and I'm super grateful. He was super patient. You know, he helped me go after the sounds I was really looking for, and a lot of it came down to guitar tones and guitar sounds, and that's that's like the new frontier for me, where what I'm most excited about is distortion, you know?
For sure.
You know, it's like we talked about, like screaming and that element of it, but I feel like a lot of what defines Suzzallo sound too is this, it's like this fuzzed out kind of 90s-ish, super saturated, heavy guitars. And
if I could get a little nerdy about it, like, what did you do? Like, how did you get some of those like super fuzzy sounds? Was there like a go-to?
Yeah, it was a long journey of,
great.
of like experimentation, you know, to get to this sound. But when I found it, I knew it. I was like, oh my God, like it was this, like a light went on. Yeah. You know, I searched for years, like literally for a couple years. I was looking for this sound, and I would get close, you know, I'd find an amp or a pedal or a guitar that would, you know, get me close to what I heard in my head. But I was really searching for this certain sound. And I went, you know, and this guitar right here, you can see on the wall, that is a,
the Black SG.
The Black SG, it's a 68. And it's just incredible. And I replaced the pickup with a Seymour Duncan distortion. And so it's like higher gain, you know, but in that particular guitar, it just worked so well. And so that was a big part of it, just having that guitar, which I tried to get a backup guitar for that for like, you know, like a year and a half. And I bought and returned like 5 guitars. I could not get one to sound like just similar enough to even just be the backup, you know, in case I break a string. Like I wanted to have, but I realized how unique and rare the sound of this particular guitar is through that process. And then when I found the amp, it was, so I was playing a bunch of different amps, and then I plugged it into a Mesa Boogie Badlander. And that guitar through that amp was a sound. Like I played it and I was like, oh my God, that's it. I found it.
Yeah.
And I was like, then I looked at the price tag, and of course it's a $3,000 head.
Of course it is. Yeah. Yeah.
So the next call is my wife, like, sorry, I finally found what I was looking for. I have to buy this amp right now.
Right. Yeah.
So I bought that amp, and then I was happy because I feel like I had found it. And then I actually added a triangle big muff. It's like the gray one. I played a bunch of different distortion pedals. But usually if you add a pedal to something like a Mesa Boogie that's already so distorted, it sounds shitty in my experience.
It's like an overload.
Totally.
Kind of thing,
it's an overkill and it doesn't work. But somehow that guitar and that amp, and then I hit the pedal with every knob turned up all the way, which is basically like how I felt. I was just looking at this, like the most intense distortion sound you can possibly get with like absolute sonic destruction, know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I found it. I like, that was the process, and I was so happy. And it goes back to like what you said about Smashing Pumpkins a bit, because I feel like, Billy Corgan did such a good job with those early Pumpkins records of defining the band with this guitar sound, and that's something I really was looking for and wanted for Suzzallo, and I feel like I found it. And then John, with his expertise in how he recorded stuff, and his approach to capturing that, I could not be happier with the guitar tones on the record. I'm so happy when I hear them. They're just like this warm blanket of absolute destruction.
That's great. Oh,
you know what I mean?
That's it's the like, quote. Add it to the EPK. That's great.
It makes me feel good. Like, okay, my life meant something because I found this sound.
It's an incredible guitar sound throughout the whole record. Like, it's still very articulate.
Yeah. You can tell what's happening.
Yeah. Which is so rare for something with that much distortion on it. Like, you can play an open E and like, that you're playing an open E, but it's also just like massive. Like, it's just like this wall of like aggression. And it's just like, yes, this is awesome. From the first note of the record, I was just like, oh yeah, we're in. Like, we're in for it now. This is great.
I'm excited. Thanks for saying that. Cause I think that's pretty perceptive of you too, because what I liked most about the sound is how articulate it was, in addition to it being so heavy, because that's what's so hard to find. You usually end up with something kind of muddy, or just you lose the power the more distorted you get.
Right. Yeah. And it's almost kind of like what you were saying with screaming, right? Where there's like, like the new metal kind of thing where like you can get a really distorted like thing, but it's not, it's like, it's a little sludgy, or
it's like, where's the power,
but like,
or the rawness. I think rawness is missing with a lot of those more technical screams. I mean, I don't really know, because metal and new metal and stuff, it's not my thing. It's not the genre that I've spent a lot of time listening to or know about, but I kind of come more from the indie and punk rock world, and that. And the singers that I like are more like Blake and Jawbreaker. I was talking to my vocal coach about it though, because it is a more dangerous world to live in. Like you can really get hurt. Yes. Obviously, from our conversation about like going to the hospital. But it's something in that danger with it, and that it being more real like that, I think is more attractive to me about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like with your screaming on this record, it's still very melodic, like you're not like just doing like a full on scream. Like it's
totally,
it's very like beautiful.
You're
hitting a note.
It's still through my kind of filter or whatever. So it's kind of, I think it's more toned down. Like people hear, this is interesting that you said that. Cause like when I was talking to my friends about the project before, and my friends and family and people who hadn't heard it, and I was saying, oh, it's so much more intense. And they heard it and they're like, yeah, but you're not like metal screaming here, man. That's like, it's basically just like an evolution of where you've been, And so, it's, I don't know. For me, it feels really intense at this stage of the game to be screaming again, because there were so many years I didn't do that at all. And everything I did was much more, almost like, I don't know, I feel like my voice was more like going in a direction of like Brandon Flowers or Tom York, or like stuff where you're way more nuanced and you're doing like falsetto and, you know, it's singing versus, you know, way more emotive screaming or even just raw, intense singing, you know, harsh singing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you do both very well. I gotta say, and like not a lot of people could do both very well. So you got that. You got that down pretty good.
It's fun. You know, that's the thing. I'm having fun with the music and the project. I think that's kind of what I'm excited about. And also just sharing this, you know, with people. It's important to me because like after going through what I went through, I feel like a new lease on life to be able to, there's been so much catharsis and healing through the process of making the record. Yeah. You know, and I want that to be there for people. So that hopefully they can, you know, relate to that experience. And, you know, and if Blake from Jawbreaker hears this interview, which I doubt he ever will, but, you know, if he ever did, I'd just say, hey, man, just be free to make what you want. Like if you want to make another Jawbreaker record, I would love it. But if not, it's totally fine too.
Just make another record in general. It doesn't need to be Jawbreaker. We'd love to hear some more.
Continue making music because he's so good at it, you know?
He is. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I won't keep you forever, but before we go, I usually just like to do this a little thing where if you could possibly rank the Jawbreaker albums. There's only 4, so it's easy.
Okay. Yeah,
but, I can do that. From worst to best, what do you think?
Okay. Let's see. It's a great question. Let me think about it. Well,
worst is subjective, but you know.
Okay, so I mean, number 1 easily is 24-hour revenge therapy for me. Like that's, and I know that has to do with the fact that that's, you know, when I saw the band, like the first time I heard the band was they were playing those songs, you know, you know, on tour for that record. So
for sure.
I feel like a lot of what we love about music is because of time and place and when we come into the story of that band, you know, and how it relates to our life. And so, you know, I always say that, like, so it's take it with a grain of salt. Like it's all somebody else's records or like rating will be totally different, you know?
Sure.
But,
right. Absolutely.
But I think, 24-hour is first for me. And then, I'd say probably Dear You is second. Okay. And then I'd say Bivouac.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know. I might say Bivouac is second.
Okay.
All right. Then Dear You, and then Unfun. Just because that's what I'm going to go with, because I'd say the songs that are so important to me on, like, I'll show you here. Look, like this, I got this on my wall, but like,
oh man.
Yeah, there's the Chesterfield Kings single.
What? That's so cool.
Yeah, from so those songs from Bivouac are also probably even more special to me personally. And I wish that record was sonically sounded a little bit different or just a bit better, you know.
That's kind of the vibe, you know.
It is.
It's supposed to sound a little shitty. It's great.
But like from straight songwriting, you know, which is what I usually go for. I think 24 Hours best, Bivouac, because it has Chesterfield King and Bivouac. Those two songs, and then even Shield Your Eyes, the first track is insanely good. Yeah. And then and then Dear You, to me, it's an amazing album. You know, there's just like 3 or 4 songs in the middle that I don't love as much.
There's a lull there for sure.
Yeah. But I still think it's a super solid offering and great piece of art. Yeah. And then Unfun, which I also think is awesome. You know, but to me, I feel like maybe it was a little before my time with the band, you know, so because it's cool and it's more like that early punk sound, you know, whatever they were doing at that time, like super fast lyrics, and I like the drumming on it a lot. Yeah. And the first song, Want, is, I mean, that's like a classic song. But I just feel like, the strength of the whole record, that's where I'd leave it.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay. Well, it's there. It's set in stone. You can't change it now. So.
Hey, and you got to put etc. in there too, because
where would you put it?
I guess it has to be higher than Dear You. Honestly, for me, because
I mean, the song when etc. hits, it hits hard.
It does. You've got Kiss the Bottle. You've got Seafoam Green is another like incredibly good song. House Sitter is probably another one of my top 5 Jawbreaker songs. Man, I think that one might move up in the ranks. It might be, it might have to be 24 Hour, etc. Bivouac.
Oh wow! Okay.
Dear You, and then Unfun. That's what I'm going with.
All right, we'll go with that. Well, on that note, we'll end it there. But Rocky, thank you so much for being a musician's musician.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Nick.